One of the best teams in the National Hockey League is coming to Pittsburgh tonight. Hunter and I are going to break down how the Penguins can get a win and more on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, Penguins fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp, joined as always by the one and only, the illustrious Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at synonym4wet. You can follow Hunter on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can follow the show's account at LO_Penguins. We thank you for making this your first listen/watch of the day because we're your team every day. We are free and available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50+ infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off of your order. That's jasemedical.com. Well, here we are, Hunter, one of your favorite teams this year. A team that was technically my former employer is coming to town tonight, and they are arguably one of the best teams in the National Hockey League, and that's the Vancouver Canucks. Nobody really saw this coming. A few people, including yourself, as you have said to me before, did buy this. I kind of didn't, and I said it to you before we hit record. The only reason I didn't really buy into the hype of the Canucks going into this year was mainly the fact that they did the same kind of thing under Bruce Boudreau that they did under Rick Tocchet. When they brought Boudreau in near the end of the year, they started playing better, and they looked like a team that was going to improve the year after. And then they cratered under Bruce Boudreau. He gets fired. Tocchet comes in, same deal. They start playing better. And then I was like, okay, so are we just going to go through this cycle where they fire a coach, the new guy comes in, they play well for a couple of months, and then they crater again? So I was extremely skeptical of this team, but by just about every metric, and the one that stands out most to me, and I want to start here for this Vancouver Canucks team, is that if you just go off the top line statistics for this Canucks team, right now, at all situations, their goal differential is by far the best in the National Hockey League at a plus 53. The closest to them is 10 away at plus 43, and that's the Winnipeg Jets. And then after that, it's an incredibly sharp drop off away from those two, where the LA Kings have a plus 30. So this, we're going to talk about this team for the next 20, 25, 30 minutes, but man, I think this team just has the magic. I think it's just one of those teams that, for some explainable reasons, for some unexplainable reasons, they are just great this year, and they just have that magic. But Hunter, what say you about the Vancouver Canucks?
It's funny, when you look at their underlyings, a lot of them are kind of average. But when you see their 61.2 actual goals rate and their plus 40 goal differential at 5-on-5 this year, that jumps out you like it's nothing. This team is stupid good. They played the New York Rangers earlier this week, and they made that team look like a peewee team at Madison Square Garden. They were kind of playing like the Harlem Globetrotters in that building and kind of messing around with them a little bit. The Canucks have been, I'll say this, I think they're the best team in the Western Conference right now, and you can easily make an argument that they are the best team in the NHL right now. I think they would give any team in the Western Conference a massive fight in a 7-game series. I think they could take Vegas in a 7-game series, Colorado, even if Colorado is fully healthy. And the number one reason is because of their star talent. That's been the biggest reason why the Canucks are so good this year. JT Miller, 19 goals, 55 points in 41 games. Pat, you weren't on the show yet at last year, but early on last year, I should say. But there was a time where JT Miller almost came to the Penguins. They were working on that deal on deadline day. It would have been a very complex deal. You see what Miller is doing now with Vancouver. Obviously, would have been very crazy to have Miller come to Pittsburgh. The Penguins obviously got Erik Karlsson and a whole bunch of other moves. But Miller has always been a very good player in the
Well,
NHL.
and here's the thing. I will say this about Miller. When the reports came out last year that they were working on that deal and it fell through,
Right.
I wasn't on board with it because
I wasn't either.
if you remember last season, he was not this JT Miller. He looked like he was fully in the rinse cycle. He looked like he was washed. He was mailing it in. He was donezo. And now all of a sudden, just about everybody else on this Canucks team, complete renaissance.
I agree. And you also would have had to be given up, what was it, Jason Zucker, Marcus Pettersson, something like that. No thanks on either of those, to be honest. You would have had to give up quite a bit of salary, quite a few picks. The contract is what it is with Miller. No thanks on that.
But I'm glad up to the contract now, though.
I agree. Yeah. And I'm glad he's playing very well with the Canucks. But after that, Elias Pettersson, 20 goals, 53 points in 41 games. Elias Pettersson might be the most underrated player in the NHL right now. If you don't know how good this player is, you are going to see firsthand on Thursday night at PPG Paints Arena. He walked Adam Fox like it was nothing earlier this week at the Garden in New York. He is stupid good, people, and it's awesome to see him play at this level. Quinn Hughes, 51 points in 41 games. It's funny with Quinn Hughes, people have always been like, man, he's underrated. No, he's been playing at this level throughout his career, but people don't notice it because he plays in Vancouver. Right now, he's a top 5 defenseman in the league. Brock Besser has 25 goals and 44 points this season. Besser just didn't really look that good last season. There was a lot of factors at play with that, but he's looking like one of the best pure goal scorers in the league this year. You have Filip Hronek on the back end. He has 34 points in 41 games. You have Connor Garland as a depth option, Dakota Joshua down there, Ilya Mikheyev. This team is very potent offensively, and the Penguins are going to have to be on high alert against this team. The Canucks lead the league in goals for per 60, 3.9. They average almost 4 goals per game. This is going to be, I think, the toughest test yet for the Penguins in terms of defending in their own zone.
We'll leave it right there at this point for the talk about the Canucks and get back more into them in the next segment. Let's go and look here at our team here in the Penguins. Same workflow that they had against the Flyers at practice yesterday. All the lines are the same. Gensel, Crosby, Raquel, DOC, Malkin, Rust, Smith, Eller, Puustinen, Harkins, Achari, Carter, and then the defense stays the same. Pettersson, Letang, Carlson, Joseph, Graves, Ruhwedel. If I were to guess, I would imagine when you're listening to this, you may already know, but I would imagine they're going to go back to Tristan Jarry for this game because it appears that they are doing the every other rotation right now with the goaltenders instead of giving Jarry 2-3 games and then putting Ned in and vice versa. So this is another game, if you were to ask me, it would be the right idea to start Jarry. Because again, we talked with Josh yesterday about everything going on with the team for our midseason check-in, and he said he believes Ned's been a better goalie. I think it's a lot closer than that, but this is another opportunity for the coaching staff to say, okay, Jarry, go out there, prove you're the guy. You're going to play one of the best teams in the league. Show us what you got.
I agree with you on that, especially with the part about how you're playing arguably the best team in hockey. This is a big moment game for the Penguins. And usually you want your starter out there in that game, especially the one that's making a lot more money than the other one. And I will say, if they do go to Nedeljkovic, I wouldn't be surprised. In 2 career starts against the Canucks, he has a .971 save percentage, 1 goals against average. So very good numbers. I know, small sample size. But for Jarry, this is the type of game where you go to him and you're like, okay, you are our number 1 guy, at least our 1A guy. We're going to throw you out there against the best team in the league, and we're going to see how you do. You've been doing that in other high leverage situations this season. I know Nedeljkovic has also been thrown into some high leverage games as well, like Boston last week, for example. That was a big one. But you need to see Jarry in these type of games as well. So I would not be surprised if they started him in this one, though. Again, overall, it's just great that they have 2 great options in that. They can go to either goalie in this one, but agree with you overall. I think they're going to go John right here. But if I'm wrong, not the end of the world. And I know we spent the first 7 minutes talking about the Canucks on this show. This is not the Locked On Canucks podcast, but I had to give them their flowers because for everyone listening and watching, this is going to be quite the test for this team tonight.
It's a great team, and this is another opportunity for the Penguins to prove that they're among the league's elite. And here's the thing that I think that's kind of getting lost, because the Canucks are rightfully getting the hype that they deserve right now. Last 10 games, identical records for both these teams. Penguins are 7-2-1 in their last 10. Canucks are 7-2-1 in their last 10. Biggest difference right now, 3-game win streak for the Canucks. So they're coming in just a little bit hotter. We'll get more into them here in the next segment, as well as what we want to watch for in tonight's game. But before we do that, we have to tell you about our sponsor, and that is Jase Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we talk just for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade, and that is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if my significant other got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from the life-saving medication they needed. Thankfully, we'll be okay thanks to Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter, and it will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off of your order. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Patrick Damp, joined as always by the incredible, the best in the business, the one and only Hunter Hodes. And it's a big one tonight. We spent the first segment kind of ping-ponging back and forth, more on the side of the Canucks than we did on the Penguins. So let's focus a little bit here more on the Penguins. We'll talk a little bit also about whether or not this Canucks team is for real. But who are you watching for tonight? Because I know my answer when it comes to the Penguins. I know who needs to step up. There's a couple of guys, but I want to start with you, Hunter. What are you looking for? Who are you watching? Overall thoughts on this game tonight?
It will be easy to say Sidney Crosby. I feel like we're watching him on a nightly basis at this point.
Would you say we're going to have a vintage Crosby performance?
We'll see. We'll see. I got to feel it, man. I got to feel it. I'm not fully feeling it.
Sorry, I couldn't help it. But again, he's been so good this year that we have to say it. Like, I'm giving you grief, but it's not like it's not without merit.
Now that I said I'm not feeling it, he's probably going to go out there and have a 5-point night, and they're going to dust this team or something like that. But I'm going to go with 2 defensemen who I'm keeping my eye on tonight. And that's both Marcus Pettersson and Chris Letang. They're going to get the lion's share of the minutes, I think, against the Canucks top line. And for those that don't know what that line is, that is Pettersson with Miller and Besser. One of the best top lines in the league this season. You can throw out Pettersson against them, see how he does. And I think Letang, with how good defensively he's been this season, that's going to be a really intriguing matchup for me, just because of their metrics overall defensively. And with how good all 3 of those Canucks players have been, it's going to be a fascinating chess match to see how much offense the Canucks can generate against those 2 defensemen. And I'm assuming Sullivan's probably going to match the Crosby line with Gensel and Raquel against them. But overall, can Pettersson and Letang step up in their own zone against what I think is one of the best top lines in hockey? That's what I have my eye on, or one of the things I have my eye on for this one.
And that's kind of been an underrated narrative or storyline, whatever you want to call it, for this season. And I've actually got his jersey up behind me right now, is that Chris Letang has really stepped up his defensive game this year. He was never bad defensively. I don't care what your uncle on Facebook said or whatever Drive Time Sports Talk radio caller here in Pittsburgh had to say. Chris Letang has always been solid defensively, but this year he has taken it to a different level. And it's been incredible to watch, because I know we talked about it with Josh in the preseason, but not yesterday, but in the preseason, about the growth of Chris Letang from kind of being that prima donna diva kind of kid to now one of the most mature people on the Penguins and an absolute leader. So it would have been very easy for him this season to kind of pout, throw it in the tank and think, they go out and get the shiny new toy and Erik Karlsson, and I'm not going to be on power play 1. I'm probably not going to be the top defensive pairing anymore. And instead he went the opposite way and he is maybe the Penguins' best penalty killer this year on the back end.
It goes to show what type of leader he is as well.
Yeah.
He knows how good Karlsson is offensively, but that's not really phasing him at all. It hasn't phased him this season. He's going about his business. He's having a really solid season, and that's really helped the Penguins turn it around, especially these last several weeks. I mean, he's been great overall.
And somebody else I want to keep an eye on, and we obviously don't know yet, as I said in the previous segment, is we don't know who's going to start for the Penguins yet tonight. I'm going to just say in general, I'm watching the Penguins goalie, whomever that may be, whether it's Jari or Ned. This, like you said, this is a team that can score. If you go just, again, to the straight up top line numbers and you go to goals for, they're right at the top through 41 games with 160 goals. So this team can score. And for the Penguins to show that they're a contender, to show that they actually do have strength between the pipes this season, do they need to get a shutout? No. That is not, I don't want to, that's even unrealistic to say against a team like the Canucks this year. Who would have thought we were ever going to say that? But they need to give up 1, maybe 2 goals, put up a good performance, 9-15 in that range, because that is, as I have said before, the great equalizer. If you have great goaltending, that is going to put you in a good position to win. And so far this season, I wouldn't go as far to say the Penguins have had great goaltending, but they've had very good goaltending.
Yes. And what's the blueprint for the Penguins for this type of game? You know it. Same thing that we've seen them do against Colorado, Vegas, and a few other teams they've played. You limit these guys to the outside. This is going to be the toughest challenge yet for eliminating this type of team to the outside and getting them out of the high danger area. They are so good at getting to those prime scoring areas. The Penguins really have their work cut out for them in terms of this one. Another player who I do have my eye on for this game, Riley Smith. It's time for him to really find the score sheet again. 2 goals in his last 29 games. That's not acceptable. I know they basically got him for free right around the time of the NHL draft last year, and he started out the season a little bit slowly, started scoring a bit, which was great. He had that great chemistry with Evgeny Malkin, was looking like that chemistry that he had with James Neal all those years ago, but that kind of fell flat a couple weeks later, and they haven't been able to find that chemistry since. You've seen Smith be demoted in favor of Drew O'Connor, which I agree with. I think O'Connor has played really well these last 2 weeks, but it's time for Riley Smith to finally show something, because he's not playing at the level that I thought he was going to play at this season. And if the Penguins really want to keep the good vibes going, it would behoove Smith to really ramp it up, because that would go a long way towards this team solidifying their playoff spot here down the stretch.
Yeah. Lastly, and not leastly, get your umbrellas out, because I'm going to drop a name here. So the last one for me, and I'm assuming, again, don't know if he's going to start, I hope he does, is Thatcher Demko for the Vancouver Canucks. As I alluded to early in the episode, when the Utica Comets were the Vancouver Canucks AHL affiliate a few years back, I actually worked for that team, and Thatcher Demko was the goalie in the AHL that year. And I was there for maybe a handful of games, my first handful of games. And all I thought was, watching this guy, was he's going to be a star one day. And that was the year, if you remember, that all of the big guys, save for Austin Matthews in the Toronto Maple Leafs organization, were still with the Marlies. Marner, Nylander, all those guys. Kapanen, before everything happened with Kapanen. And it was a stacked Marlies team that basically walked their way to the Calder Cup. The only team that gave them any sort of a series was the Comets. And I would say maybe 80% of that was Thatcher Demko just being an absolute animal. So this guy should be in the Vezina conversation this year. And if he's not, I would genuinely be stunned.
I would be very surprised as well. I knew Demko was for real when he was the only reason why that 2020 series against Vegas went 7 games. He was on fire for the Canucks during that series. That was the COVID shortened season in 2020. And again, Demko was legitimately the only reason why that went to a 7th game. He was on another planet in that series. So far this season, he has been unbelievable. Second in terms of goals saved above expected with 13.6, 916 save percentage, 2.54 goals against average, playing like one of the best goaltenders in the league. He absolutely should be in the Vezina conversation. I would be kind of surprised if he didn't start in this one. Overall, we should be in line for a really fun goaltending matchup for this game.
And real quick, the thing that's crazy is even though Thatcher Demko's played 29 games, Casey DeSmith has only played 13, but same save percentage this year, both rocking a 916. So
kudos to him. I'm glad he's having a bounce back.
Yeah.
He wasn't good in Pittsburgh last year. The Penguins needed a fresh start. You couldn't run that tandem back for another season. I am glad that DeSmith is playing well in Vancouver. I'll say that.
And this is where we'll end this segment. And that's what Casey DeSmith needs to be. He needs to be a guy who starts 25, maybe 30 games, if that. He can't be a spot starter. If he's doing this where he's playing every 3rd, 4th, 5th game, he's a solid backup. He's a very solid backup. But if he's got to start stealing starts from the guy in front of him, then you run into trouble. So good to see him bouncing back. He was a solid backup here, except for when he had to be a spot starter, like I said. But that's going to do it for this segment. When we come back, we're going to go over a couple little odds and ends ahead of tonight's game. But before we do that, we have to tell you about our next sponsor, and that is Sleeper. It's almost the halfway point in the season. We're actually at about the halfway mark of the season now, Penguins fans. And here we are, battling for a playoff spot, just like we had hoped. Regardless of where we are in the current standings, though, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our #1 choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win up to 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. Right now, I would absolutely probably take Thatcher Demko, Sidney Crosby, Jake Gensel as a couple of guys to take 100 times my money because they are playing outside of their minds. I love this app because it's daily fantasy. It's not season long, so I don't get bogged down in lineup decisions, waivers, trades, all of that. It's one day. Entries can be made in under a minute, and all you have to do is pick whether studs like Crosby, Gensel, Demko, JT Miller, you name it. The stars are there, and you have to name whether or not they will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Penguins fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper, so start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That is code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Welcome back, Penguins fans, to the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp, joined as always by the illustrious, the one and only, the elite co-host of the elite, Hunter Hodes. And we ended the last segment talking about goaltending, the kind of goaltending matchup that's coming tonight when the Vancouver Canucks come to town. But we also have to give a shout out to another goaltender in the Penguins system, and that is Wilkes-Barre's goaltender Joel Blomqvist, who was just named to the 2024 AHL All-Star Classic that will take place in San Jose. He's having himself quite a year.
Yeah, he's been fantastic. And this is his first full season in Wilkes-Barre, 19 starts, 2.16 goals against average, 920 save percentage. Sometimes it takes a little longer than some to really adjust to North America compared to playing overseas, but Blomqvist has really adjusted to playing in Wilkes-Barre, and it's nice seeing him have a really strong year for Wilkes-Barre. I don't think he's in the Penguins' plans for next year, but maybe the year after that, or even the year after that, he could be on this roster as a backup or even as a starter. But it's just nice seeing him playing at a high level this year.
Yeah, and he's only 22 years old. They took him in the 2020 draft.
Right.
He did project pretty high despite being a second-round pick. He was taken 52nd overall, excuse me. And, I mean, he's a big dude. He's 6'2", 187. And like you said, he might not be in the immediate plans for the Penguins, but you think about it from this perspective, right? Obviously, you got Jari locked up long term. He's not going anywhere. Actually, I kind of want to walk that back a little bit. He's not going anywhere because he's also played pretty well, but that contract is not immovable. It's actually fairly affordable once the salary cap goes up, but that's a different discussion for a different day. The way Ned's playing this year, only being on a 1-year deal, there's a good chance he's probably not back next year because there's a real chance he could get paid and go be a starter somewhere rather than a 1B. So, maybe he's somebody that you kind of do goalie by committee, especially considering I believe he's still waivers exempt. That's somebody that, maybe you get a veteran backup on league minimum and you kind of platoon all of them back and forth and just see what happens. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to see that it does always feel like, even since the days of Fleury, the Penguins have kind of always had good goaltending prospects.
And there's another I want to tell you about, a recent 4th-round pick. Sergei Murashov, he's been playing really good in Russia. He hasn't made it over to North America just yet, but this season in the MHL in Russia, he's played 22 games, 1.98 goals against average, 930 save percentage, and he's also had a little bit of a few starts in the KHL, 4 games, 1.77 goals against average, 926 save percentage. Really strong numbers in a couple of pretty good leagues out in Russia. I want to see how that translates to North America when he's ready to come over to Wilkes-Barre whenever.
Yeah, and I mean, like I was saying there, though, too, is you look at, regardless of how it's turned out, right? You had Fleury, and then behind him was Matt Murray. And then behind Matt Murray was Tristan Jarry. And now behind him, you maybe have Blomqvist and a couple other guys. So it also helps in the long term because when you think about it, there haven't been in the modern era a ton of teams. There's been a few, but a lot of teams that have won the Stanley Cup since the salary cap was implemented, not a lot of franchise goalies. It's been guys who are on more affordable deals, guys who are a little bit sort of journeyman or not quite your franchise goalie. So the fact that you can kind of cycle those guys in and out is a bit of an organizational strength.
I agree. And it's just, again, nice having really good depth at this position overall, because this is good for the short-term future of the franchise and especially good for the long-term future of the franchise, even though Tristan is signed for quite a few more years on that deal. You mentioned Alex Nedeljkovic. He might not be back next year. He could be looking at maybe $2.5 million, $3 million on a contract, maybe even more than that. Heck, Jonas Korpisalo got over $5 million on his deal with Ottawa, and he hasn't really been that good this season. He could be looking at that money if he continues to play this well. So the backup job next season for Jarry could be wide open. I'm not saying Murashov is going to be ready for that role, but maybe if Blomqvist continues to play well, he could get a small look, though I would probably lean towards someone that already has NHL experience getting that look for Jarry. He might still be a couple years away, and Murashov is even further than that at this point, but it's still great depth to have in the organization.
Yeah, and that's kind of also going to be the way this summer goes for a lot of teams, because there are a lot of teams right now that their biggest need is goaltending and nobody really has any goalies to give. So if you're a free agent goalie going into this summer, chances are you are going to get overpaid just because a lot of teams need goaltending right now. But that is going to do it for us on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. It's the Penguins. It's the Canucks. Tonight, 7 o'clock at PPG Paints Arena. If you're not going, you can catch it on Sportsnet Pittsburgh or 105.9 The X. We will be back tomorrow to give you a recap of this game and get you set for the Carolina Hurricanes game on Saturday. But for Hunter Hodes, I am Patrick Damp. Thank you for tuning into this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.